She had the degree, the career path, and everything that was supposed to come next. A bachelor's in education, then a master's degree, then years of work in the field she had trained for. On paper, Gina Lumnah had made exactly the right moves. Then she and her husband bought 500 acres of raw, undeveloped land in northern New Hampshire and started building a life from scratch, with no structures, no farm, and no guarantee that any of it would work. That was the decision people closest to them never fully understood at the time. Not a gradual drift away from one life toward another, an abrupt, deliberate pivot toward something with no safety net. What made it harder to explain was that there was no crisis behind it, no job loss, no dramatic falling out with the conventional world. Gina wasn't running away from something. She was running toward a version of life that most people only talk about but rarely attempt. And the reason she was willing to go that far, to actually do it instead of just imagining it, had everything to do with a set of values that had been building for years before the land purchase ever happened. The channel they eventually built together, Lumnah Acres, now has more than 375,000 subscribers and over 191 million total views. They post 3 days a week. The content covers everything from barn construction and off-grid systems to greenhouse gardening, raising highland cattle, and now the restoration of a 150-year-old vacant farm they purchased in 2025. But the question viewers keep asking, especially those who have followed since the early days, is specifically about Gina. Who was she before all this? What was her actual role in building something this large? And what is she doing now that the operation has taken yet another major turn? The answers are more layered than most people expect. Alcide Lumnah, known on the channel as Al, grew up near Boston, Massachusetts. His background was technical, rooted in engineering, the kind of skill set that would eventually prove useful when it came time to install septic systems, raise post and beam structures, and figure out how to build a functioning home on land that had none of the infrastructure most people take for granted. Gina came from a different background entirely. Her focus was education. She pursued a bachelor's degree and then a master's degree, both in education, a path that signals long-term commitment, not a passing interest. Someone who earns a master's in education is not dabbling. They have made a decision about how they intend to spend their professional life: teaching, developing curriculum, working with students. The credential matters, but so does what it represents: years of deliberate preparation for a specific kind of career. The two married in June 2005. At that point, there was nothing particularly unusual about their trajectory. Al had his technical background. Gina had her education credentials and was working as a tutor, applying the specialized skills her degree represented. They were a couple with solid, clearly defined professional identities. What shifted was not any single event. It was a gradual accumulation of conviction, the belief that the food they were eating, the systems they were participating in, and the pace of life they were living did not align with what they actually wanted. Al has said in interviews that the core motivation behind their move toward homesteading was health and wellness. Specifically, a desire to grow the most nutritionally dense food possible for their family and friends. That framing matters. This wasn't nostalgia for a rural past. It was a deliberate, reasoned decision about how they wanted to eat, live, and raise a family. For Gina specifically, the decision carried a particular weight. Walking away from an education career, from something she had spent years building, meant accepting that the next chapter had no guaranteed income, no institutional structure, and no precedent in her immediate world. It was not a small thing. The land they purchased in northern New Hampshire was not a working farm. It was not a fixer-upper with existing infrastructure waiting to be improved. It was raw, undeveloped. The property sits in the Littleton area, near the White Mountains, in a part of New England where winters are long, harsh, and unforgiving. When they describe their starting point, they mean it literally. No house, no barn, no cleared fields. What the property did have was approximately 500 acres, 2 man-made ponds, some streams, and road access. That was the foundation they chose to work from. Building their primary home using post and beam construction was one of the first major undertakings they documented. The process became content. Al's engineering background gave him a framework for approaching structural problems. Gina's role in those early years was partly practical, contributing to the physical work, and partly connective, bringing an understanding of how to communicate complex processes to an audience in a way that actually made sense. That second skill set, drawn directly from her education background, would turn out to matter enormously. Lumnah Acres is not a channel that simply films farm life. It teaches. The content is structured to show viewers not just what is happening, but how it works and why it matters. That pedagogical approach, that instinct to break down information and make it accessible, is not something that comes naturally to everyone. For someone with a master's in education, it is second nature. Their daughter Olivia was born into this project. She has appeared in videos throughout the channel's run, growing up on camera as the homestead grew around her. The family element has always been central to what Lumnah Acres presents. This is not a solo project or a couple performing for an audience. It is a functioning family operation documented in real time. What they were building was, from the beginning, something that required every skill both of them had. Al's technical expertise handled the systems. Gina's background shaped how those systems were explained, and her growing hands-on knowledge shaped what the farm itself became. The Lumnah Acres YouTube channel was created on September 11, 2012, though the documented homestead journey is generally described as having begun around 2015, when consistent content production ramped up. The early audience was small. Building a subscriber base from zero on a homesteading channel is a slow process. The content niche was not nearly as crowded then as it would become in later years, but it also meant there were fewer viewers actively searching for it. The moment that changed their visibility came through an unexpected connection. Justin Rhodes, who produces the Great American Farm Tour, one of the more widely watched homesteading documentary series in the YouTube space, featured Al and the Lumnah Acres property. The segment highlighted Al's use of chickens to restore an orchard, a technique drawn from rotational grazing principles and the kind of practical, information-dense content that homesteading audiences respond to. Rhodes and his audience were enthusiastic. Comments flooded in. New subscribers found the channel. From that point, growth continued. The channel crossed 100,000 subscribers, then 200,000. By the time they reached 350,000, they had uploaded well over 1,800 videos. The 3 times per week schedule, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, created a consistency that kept audiences returning. Over 191 million total views accumulated across that archive. Along the way, they added tangible elements to the brand. Lumnah Acres merchandise, clothing, accessories, a branded coffee line available through their own website, affiliate partnerships including with Amazon Associates and equipment brands, a partnership with TYM Tractors, through which Al specifically discussed the role of their TYM T574 model, which they upgraded to from an earlier TYM, in handling the heavy work of land clearing, septic installation, barn construction, and snow management. These are not hobby farm problems. This is working farm equipment being used for working farm scale challenges. They also built a 30 by 48-foot Rimmel nor'easter high tunnel greenhouse, a commercial-grade structure that allowed them to grow vegetables year-round in a climate that would otherwise make extended growing seasons impossible. The greenhouse became its own content series, documented day by day from installation through the first harvest cycles. The brand had become real. What had started as a couple filming themselves on raw land had developed into a functioning operation with a large, loyal audience and multiple income streams. Here is the part of the Lumnah Acres story that tends to get flattened in casual coverage. Gina's role on the channel is not interchangeable with Al's, and it has evolved significantly over time. Al's engineering background makes him the primary presence in construction and equipment content. He is the one operating the tractor, planning the structural projects, working through the technical challenges of off-grid systems. That content is central to the channel and is what most first-time viewers associate with the Lumnah Acres brand. Gina's domain, which she has built deliberately over years, runs alongside that. She manages the animal care side of the operation with a degree of specificity that reflects genuine expertise accumulated through practice. The Highland cattle herd, introduced to the channel in April 2024, and now one of the more recognizable elements of the operation, is listed under Gina's care on farming directories that track breeders. That is not a ceremonial distinction. Highland cattle are a particular breed with particular needs, and the decision to add them to a homestead at this scale was not casual. The greenhouse production, the vegetable growing, and the gardening content have also been Gina's domain in significant ways. Working alongside Al on the greenhouse build was documented in detail, but the ongoing management of what grows inside it, the vegetable planning, the growing cycles, the year-round production strategy in a northern New Hampshire climate, draws on exactly the kind of systematic thinking her education background reflects. Her tutoring work is described in some sources as an ongoing activity even alongside the homestead operation. That is worth noting because it underlines something about who Gina is. She did not simply replace one identity with another. The education background did not disappear. It informed how she approached learning every new skill the homestead required: livestock care, growing cycles, preservation, animal health, and how she communicated those skills to an audience of viewers who were often learning alongside her. What most viewers see is a partnership. What is actually happening is two people with very different professional backgrounds applying those backgrounds to a shared project in ways that are genuinely complementary. The channel works because they are not the same person doing the same things. In July 2025, Al and Gina announced something that marked the largest single shift in the Lumnah Acres story since they first bought their original 500 acres. They had purchased a 150-year-old vacant farm. The announcement came through a video titled simply, "So, we bought a 150-year-old vacant farm." The channel's description was updated to reflect this. After years of building their homestead from scratch, they had taken on what they described as a whole new adventure, a place they had dreamed about for years. Now they were committed to restoring it, not as a replica of what it once was, but as something new, a thriving regenerative farm. The language shift matters. Lumnah Acres has always practiced elements of what falls under the sustainable and regenerative farming umbrella: rotational grazing, growing their own feed, managing land rather than simply extracting from it. But the explicit commitment to regenerative farming as an organizing principle for the new property represented a meaningful evolution in their stated mission. They did not make that move quietly. In July 2025, they brought in Joel Salatin to walk the 150-year-old property and help them map out a regenerative plan. Joel Salatin operates Polyface Farm, a 700-acre operation in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, and is one of the most recognized names in the regenerative agriculture movement worldwide. His approach centers on using animals, cattle, chickens, pigs, as the primary tools for rebuilding soil health and fertility. Inviting him to consult on the new Lumnah Acres property was not a casual booking. It was a signal about where they intended to take this. The community post Lumnah Acres published about the visit read, "They brought Salatin in to walk the farm and help map out a regenerative future, and got more than they expected." That phrase, "more than we expected," is the kind of language that generates forward momentum for a channel. It tells the audience that what they are watching is not a settled operation executing a known plan. It is an active process of discovery, still unfolding. For Gina specifically, this new property represents an expansion of everything she has been building toward. The 150-year-old farm is not a second location running parallel to the original homestead. It is the next chapter of the same story, one that now explicitly involves restoring old buildings, creating new systems, and transforming land that has been vacant and dormant back into something productive. Her background in education, her accumulated knowledge of animal care and growing, her years on camera communicating complex processes to a large audience, all of it becomes more relevant at a larger scale, not less. As of mid-2026, the Lumnah Acres channel is active and consistent. New videos continue on the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule. The subscriber count stands at approximately 375,000. Monthly views run over 1.2 million. The channel is well past 2,000 uploaded videos. The content has shifted to reflect the new property, barn restoration, new systems, the ongoing work of turning a 150-year-old vacant farm into a functioning regenerative operation. This is the kind of long-form, multi-year project that sustains a channel like Lumnah Acres, because it provides a narrative arc that keeps viewers returning not just to watch what is happening now, but to see what comes next. Gina and Al both remain central to that content. The channel's official description names them explicitly. "We're Al and Gina, a husband and wife team." That is not language that changes quietly. It is a statement of how the operation is presented and understood. The business operates under the registered entity Lumnah Acres, LLC, based in Littleton, New Hampshire. The official P.O. box is in Littleton as well. They have built something with genuine infrastructure, a legal business entity, a merchandise operation, brand partnerships, a coffee line, and an audience that has followed them across more than a decade of content. What happened to Gina from Lumnah Acres is, ultimately, this. She made a decision most people in her position would not have made, walked away from the professional path she had spent years building, and co-created something that is simultaneously a working farm, a media operation, and a business. She has raised Highland cattle, built a greenhouse capable of producing vegetables through a New Hampshire winter, raised a daughter largely off the grid, and is now helping restore a farm that has been sitting vacant for years. The master's degree in education did not go to waste. It just turned out to be useful in ways nobody who awarded it probably anticipated. Gina Lumnah's story is not about someone who disappeared or stepped away. It is about someone who made a choice that looked, from the outside, like it carried enormous risk, and then built something that justified the decision over the course of more than a decade of visible, documented work. The Lumnah Acres operation continues. The 150-year-old farm they purchased in 2025 is actively being restored, with regenerative farming as the explicit goal. Joel Salatin's consultation is already informing how they plan to use the land, and the channel continues to bring viewers inside that process in real time. The new property represents the largest undertaking they have taken on since the original 500-acre purchase that started everything. What comes next? How the regenerative farm takes shape, what role the Highland cattle play in that system, and how a decade of accumulated knowledge applies to a building with 150 years of its own history is still being documented. One question worth sitting with: if you had a master's degree and a stable career, would you have walked away from it to start from raw land